The Fog of Whispering Pines. The fog descended upon the Hamptons like a thick curtain drawn across the stage of some grand, tragic opera. It was October 1985, a time when Ronald Reagan's optimistic speeches filled the airwaves, Wall Street traders were making fortunes on junk bonds, and the Cold War's chill lingered in every headline about Soviet spies and nuclear arms. But at Whispering Pines, a majestic Tudor revival mansion perched on the cliffs overlooking the Atlantic, the outside world felt distant, almost irrelevant. The estate, with its ivy-covered stone walls, steeply pitched gabled roofs, and mullionied windows that glowed like watchful eyes, belonged to Harlan Whitaker, a 65-year-old self-made millionaire whose wealth stemmed from Texas oil fields and discreet arms dealings that often skirted the edges of legality. Harlan had assembled a group of 5 men-old associates, rivals, and family for what he billed as a gentleman's retreat. No wives nagging about cholesterol, no kids demanding attention, just poker, premium cigars, single malt scotch, and conversations about mergers, markets, and maybe a little politics. Detective Frank Mallory was the first to arrive that Friday evening, his reliable 1978 Ford LTD sedan crunching over the gravel driveway, its engine humming like an old friend. At 62, Frank was retired from the New York Police Department after 3 decades of pounding pavements, interrogating suspects, and dodging bullets in the city's shadowy underbelly. His salt and pepper mustache hid a perpetual frown, and a limp from a 1972 shootout with a Gambino family enforcer in Brooklyn served as a constant reminder of the job's toll. Frank wasn't the type for fancy getaways. His idea of relaxation was a stool at O'Malley's bar in Queens, nursing a beer while watching Monday Night Football. But Harlan had been a valuable tipster back in the day, slipping Frank leads on corporate espionage and insider trading that led to high-profile arrests. "Come on out to the Hamptons, Frank," Harlan had boomed over the phone 2 weeks earlier. "No cases, no crooks, just good bourbon, better cigars, and some Texas Hold'em to keep things lively. You deserve a break, old buddy." Frank had grumbled but agreed, packing a suitcase with flannel shirts, his service revolver just in case, and a battered pipe for those thoughtful moments. As Frank stepped out of his car, the fog swirled around his ankles, carrying the salty tang of the ocean. The mansion loomed ahead, its lights piercing the mist like beacons. He adjusted his tweed jacket bought second-hand from a thrift shop in Astoria and headed toward the grand oak front door, flanked by stone lions that seemed to snarl in disapproval of his modest arrival. Victor Kane was next, his silver Mercedes-Benz 450 SL purring up the drive like a contented panther. Victor, a 58-year-old investment banker from Boston, exuded the slick confidence of a man who'd read The Art of the Deal before it was even published. His hair was slicked back with Brill cream, his pinstriped suit tailored on Savile Row, and his gold Rolex glinted under the porch lights. Victor and Harlan went way back. They'd partnered on several deals in the late 70s, but a botched oil merger in 1983 had left Victor out in the cold, losing him nearly $2 million. Whispers in financial circles suggested Victor had vowed revenge, though he'd always laughed it off as just business. As he parked and grabbed his leather valise, Victor cast a disdainful glance at Frank's Ford. "Rough ride from the city, detective," he called with a smirk. "Not as rough as some mergers I've heard about," Frank replied dryly, shaking Victor's hand. The grip was firm, too firm like a challenge. Edward "Eddie" Langford arrived shortly after, his black Chevy Blazer rumbling like a tank. Eddie, 59, was a former Marine with a build like a linebacker and scars crisscrossing his face from shrapnel in Vietnam's jungles. After the war, he'd turned to private security, handling Harlan's personal protection and corporate safeguards. But lately, there were rumors, Eddie had been dipping into expense accounts, padding bills for phantom bodyguards. Harlan had confronted him about it just last month, threatening to cut ties. Eddie stepped out, his combat boots thudding on the gravel, a duffel bag slung over one shoulder. "Frank, Victor," he nodded gruffly, his eyes scanning the surroundings out of habit. "Fog's thick as pea soup. Good for hiding secrets, Ed." Dr. Samuel Roth pulled up in a sensible Volvo station wagon, the engine whispering compared to the others' roars. Samuel, 61, was a psychiatrist from Philadelphia, with wire-rimmed glasses, a neatly trimmed beard, and a tweed jacket that screamed academia. He'd been Harlan's personal therapist for 5 years, prescribing Valium for insomnia and listening to confessions that could topple empires' affairs, shady deals, regrets from the war era. Samuel's practice included high-profile clients, some with ties to Washington, and there was talk that Harlan had used those sessions to dig up dirt on rivals. Samuel greeted the group with a polite smile, but his hands trembled slightly as he lit a Marlboro. "Gentlemen." Quite the atmospheric welcome. Last to arrive was Tommy Whitaker, Harlan's 32-year-old nephew, screeching in on a red Porsche 911 Turbo, Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA, blasting from the stereo at full volume. Tommy was the black sheep, a playboy with a gambling addiction that had cost him jobs, relationships, and Harlan's patience. The tycoon had bailed him out of debts to Vegas bookies more times than anyone could count, but lately, Harlan had drawn a line, no more handouts. Tommy leaped out, his leather jacket open, flashing a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Uncles and amigos, let's get this party started." Harlan himself emerged from the foyer to welcome them, his presence filling the doorway like a force of nature. At 65, he was a bear of a man 6'3", broad-shouldered, with a ruddy face etched by decades of hard living and harder negotiations. His laugh boomed across the driveway. "Gentlemen, come in, come in. Leave your troubles at the gate. This weekend is about relaxation, reminiscing, and maybe relieving you of some cash at the poker table." He clapped backs, shook hands, and ushered them inside, where a fire roared in the massive stone hearth, and a butler hired for the occasion offered trays of scotch on the rocks. The dining room was a testament to Harlan's wealth, oak-paneled walls, a crystal chandelier casting warm light over a long mahogany table set with fine china and silver. Dinner was a hearty American feast: juicy prime rib roasted to pink perfection, loaded baked potatoes with sour cream and chives, creamed spinach, fresh rolls, and ears of corn dripping with butter. The wine was a 1972 Cabernet Sauvignon from Harlan's cellar, each bottle worth a small fortune. As they ate, conversation flowed like the wine. Harlan held court, regaling them with tales of striking oil in West Texas back in the 60s. "Boys, Reagan's got it right: trickle-down economics. Cut taxes, let the money flow, and everyone's happy." Victor nodded vigorously, but his eyes narrowed when Harlan mentioned their old merger. "Speaking of deals, Victor, that '83 flop was a learning experience, water under the bridge." Victor forced a laugh. "Sure, Harlan. Water under the bridge." Eddie, chewing his steak like it was an enemy, steered to politics. "Gorbachev's perestroika, bunch of commie smoke. Can't trust the Reds." Samuel, ever the intellectual, countered with psychological insights. "It's all about fear, gentlemen. The Cold War is a collective neurosis." Tommy, downing his third glass of wine, joked about the Mets. "If they win the series next year, I'll quit gambling for good." Frank stayed quiet, observing the way Victor's fork trembled slightly, Eddie's clenched jaw, Samuel's chain-smoking, Tommy's forced cheer. Something simmered beneath the surface, like a pot about to boil over. After dinner, they adjourned to the library, a cozy den of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with first editions of Hemingway and Twain, leather armchairs arranged around a green felt poker table, and the same roaring fireplace casting flickering shadows. Harlan lit a Cuban cigar, puffing contentedly as he shuffled the deck. Texas Hold'em, gents. Ante is $50. Let's see who Lady Luck favors tonight. The game began innocently enough, with small bets and banter. Frank, no high roller, played conservatively, folding early on weak hands. Victor bet aggressively, bluffing with a poker face honed in boardrooms. Eddie played tight, his military discipline showing. Samuel hesitated on every decision, as if analyzing the psychological tells. Tommy, reckless as always, went all in on a pair of eights and lost big. As the clock ticked toward midnight, the stakes had climbed to thousands. Bourbon flowed from a crystal decanter, the room hazy with cigar smoke. Harlan won a big pot with a full house, laughing heartily. "That's how it's done, boys." But then he glanced at his watch, a gold Patek Philippe, and stood. "Gotta make a quick call in the study. Business with a contact in D.C. can't wait. Keep the game going, I'll be back in 20. He stubbed out his cigar and headed down the hall, the heavy oak door to his study closing with a definitive thunk. The game continued without him, but the energy shifted. Victor grumbled, "Typical Harlan, always the big shot, leaving us hanging." Eddie cracked his knuckles, a habit Frank recognized as stress. Samuel lit another cigarette, his fingers shaking. Tommy dealt the next hand, but his eyes darted toward the hall. "Uncle's been acting weird lately. Paranoid about something." Frank nursed his drink, his detective instincts kicking in despite retirement. "Paranoid how?" Tommy shrugged. "Says someone's out to get him. Business rivals, maybe." An hour passed. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 1:15 a.m. Frank set down his cards. "Harlan's taking too long. Anyone seen him?" Heads shook. Tommy volunteered to check, knocking on the study door. No answer. He tried the handle locked tight. "Uncle Harlan, you okay in there?" Frank joined him, rattling the knob. The door was solid, no give. "Step back." He shouldered it, but it held. Eddie, the muscle, stepped up. "Let me." With a grunt and a powerful ram, the door burst open, wood splintering around the lock. The study was dimly lit by a brass desk lamp, casting long shadows across bookshelves, a globe bar, and a massive mahogany desk. Harlan was slumped forward over the desk, his face buried in a blotter soaked with blood. A silver letter opener, Harlan's own, engraved with his initials, protruded from his back, embedded deep between the shoulder blades. The wound was clean, no struggle apparent. The phone receiver dangled off the hook, emitting a monotonous dial tone. The room's only window was latched securely from the inside, curtains undisturbed, no signs of forced entry. The door had been locked from within, the key still turned in the interior lock. "Holy Christ," Tommy whispered, his face ashen. Victor turned pale, backing away. "Is he?" Samuel knelt, pressing fingers to Harlan's neck. "No pulse. He's gone." Eddie swept the room with his eyes, hands balled into fists. "Who did this?" Frank's cop mode activated instantly. "Everyone out. Don't touch a damn thing, this is a crime scene now." He herded them back to the library, his mind racing. Locked room, stabbed in the back, no weapon thrown aside. Classic puzzle, like something out of those Agatha Christie novels his late wife used to read. The local sheriff, Bill Hargrove, arrived within 40 minutes, his patrol car's sirens wailing through the fog, blue lights flashing eerily. Hargrove was a burly, mustachioed man in his 50s, more accustomed to ticketing speeders on Route 27 or breaking up bar brawls in Montauk than handling high society homicides. He surveyed the scene, scratching his head. Stabbed in a locked room, door bolted from inside, window shut. Looks like murder, but how the hell? Frank nodded. Not suicide, can't stab yourself in the back like that. Let me assist, Bill. I've seen my share of locked room mysteries in the city. Hargrove eyed him, then shrugged. Unofficial, but yet. You're the expert. As dawn broke, gray and misty, the guests were confined to the mansion. No leaving the property, no outside calls until alibis were verified. Frank's orders, backed by Hargrove. The study was cordoned off with yellow tape borrowed from the sheriff's trunk. The county coroner, a lanky doctor named Ellis, arrived by 7 a.m., confirming the obvious, death by single stab wound to the heart, time of death around 12:30 a.m., no defensive wounds, no poison in initial checks. The letter opener was wiped clean, no fingerprints. Frank set up interviews in the sunroom, a glass-enclosed space with wicker furniture and views of the foggy cliffs and crashing waves below. Coffee was brewed strong and black, steam rising as the October chill seeped through the panes. Victor Kane went first, sitting ramrod straight, his Rolex ticking loudly in the quiet. I never left the poker table after Harlan exited. The others can confirm it. Frank noted the watch's loose band, perhaps a tell of nervousness. You and Harlan had bad blood over that '83 merger. He cut you out, cost you millions. Motive? Victor smirked, but his eyes were cold. Business is ruthless, detective. But murder, I'd rather sue him. Besides, I was winning at poker, why ruin a good night? Eddie Langford next, his bulk overflowing the wicker chair. I stepped out for a smoke around 12:45, back porch. Alone. Saw nothing unusual. No alibi witness. Frank pressed, Harlan fired you yesterday afternoon, didn't he, for skimming security funds? That's a hell of a grudge. Eddie clenched his fists, scars whitening. He accused me, yeah. But I didn't do it. Vietnam taught me discipline, kill only when necessary. Dr. Samuel Roth fidgeted, adjusting his glasses. I remained in the library, reading a volume on Freudian theory. No one saw me leave. As executor of Harlan's will, Samuel stood to gain fees, and those therapy sessions held explosive secrets. Harlan confided in you about affairs, deals. Blackmail potential. Samuel paled. Doctor-patient privilege, detective. But no, I wouldn't kill over words. Tommy Whitaker paced during his turn, unable to sit. I loved my uncle, even if he was tough. Yeah, he was cutting me off from the inheritance if I didn't clean up my act, but I didn't. Tommy got the bulk of the estate, motive galore. Alibi, at the table, but he'd taken 2 bathroom breaks, each 5 minutes. The locked room puzzled Frank most. Key in the interior lock, window latched, no hidden panels. He'd tapped every wall and checked the blueprints from Harlan's safe. The safe itself was ajar, contents disturbed, legal documents, the will naming Tommy heir, Samuel executor, small bequests to others, and a cryptic note in Harlan's scrawl, the traitor is closer than you think. Watch your back. By midday, Tensions boiled. In the library, Victor accused Eddie, "You had access to the house, knew the layout. Revenge for the firing." Eddie shot back, "And you owed him money, Kane. Debts make men desperate." Samuel suggested a group session to uncover repressed motives. Tommy drowned his anxiety in scotch, muttering about family curses. Frank took a walk on the grounds, pipe clenched in his teeth, the fog lifting slightly to reveal the estate's manicured lawn sloping to sheer cliffs, where waves thundered against rocks 50 feet below. Near the study window, half buried in mulch, he found a fresh cigar stub, Harlan's preferred Cuban brand, but Harlan hadn't smoked one after dinner. Someone else, Eddie, smoked cigars, Victor preferred cigarettes, Samuel too, Tommy none. Lunch was 10 sandwiches from the kitchen, eaten in silence. Hargrove returned with news, no prints on the letter opener. Killer wore gloves. Professional touch. As afternoon wore on, Frank pored over Harlan's papers in a guest room. Among them, letters from a shadowy contact in Eastern Europe, hints of arms deals with Soviet intermediaries. Harlan involved in Cold War espionage, selling tech to the Reds. Victor's bank had ties to Swiss accounts used by Eastern Bloc agents. Eddie's Vietnam service, perhaps he'd been turned by the enemy. Samuel's patients included State Department officials with access to secrets. Tommy's gambling debts owed to mobsters with KGB links. Frank slipped out to a payphone in nearby East Hampton, calling an old FBI contact, Agent Mike Donnelly. "Harlan Whitaker, yeah, he was on our watch list," Donnelly said. "Suspected of funneling missile tech to Moscow via back channels. But word is, he was flipping, offering to testify for immunity. Big case brewing." Back at Whispering Pines, Frank gathered the group in the library as the sun set, fog rolling in again. This isn't just greed or grudge. Harlan was mixed up in treason, selling secrets to the Soviets. One of you is the traitor he feared. Accusations flew. Victor pointed at Eddie, "You guarded his meetings, easy to spy." Eddie lunged, fist raised, but Frank intervened. "Calm down. We're getting to the bottom of this." A breakthrough came with the phone. Harlan's last dial traced to a Manhattan number. Frank called it, a woman answered, Harlan's mistress, Elena, a former model. He called at midnight, sounded scared. Said a betrayer among friends was closing in, mentioned documents in his safe. Who knew about Elena? Only Samuel, from therapy confessions. But the locked room nagged. Frank recreated the scene that evening, locking himself in the study, testing theories. String through the keyhole to turn the key from outside. No, keyhole too small. Window latch manipulated with wire from the roof. Possible, but risky in fog. Chimney drop for the weapon too narrow. Dinner was leftovers, mood poisonous. Then, a scream from the library at 10 p.m. Samuel Roth, clutching his arm, face contorted. "Poison. In my drink." He collapsed, foaming at the mouth. Frank, remembering his first aid training, forced him to vomit into a basin, then called for Hargrove's paramedics. Samuel survived belladonna in his scotch, a deadly nightshade extract. Who poured it? Frank demanded. Victor had handled the bar. Eddie had access to toxins from his security kit. Tommy had mixed drinks earlier. Samuel self-inflicted to deflect suspicion. The night brought no sleep. Frank patrolled the halls, revolver in pocket. At 2 a.m., a gunshot echoed. In the upstairs hallway, Eddie lay clutching his leg, blood pooling. "Someone in the shadows shot at me." The weapon, Harlan's .38 revolver from the safe, prints smudged. Paranoia gripped the group. Frank's mind whirled with Christie-like twists. Were they all in on it, a conspiracy to silence Harlan before he flipped to the FBI? Day 3 dawned rainy. Frank confronted their shared history: Vietnam. Harlan hadn't served, dodging the draft with bone spurs like some politicians. But Eddie had, losing buddies to defective gear supplied by Harlan's early companies. Victor had a brief stint, discharged for medical reasons. Samuel was a medic, treating horrors. Tommy was too young, but his father, Harlan's brother, died in Nam. Eddie cracked under pressure. Harlan's supplies were crap: helmets that shattered, guns that jammed. Cost lives. But kill him now? No. A glove found in Victor's suitcase tested positive for blood traces: Harlan's. Victor protested, planted. Someone's framing me. Alibis unraveled. No one could account for every minute. Then, Samuel Roth confessed in a private talk with Frank. I did it. Harlan was blackmailing me over a patient, a diplomat whose secrets I leaked. He threatened to expose me. But the how poison first, at dinner in his bourbon. He felt ill, went to the study. I followed, stabbed the body to misdirect, locked the door, and hid. Hid where? The armoire in the corner, large, empty of coats. When Eddie broke the door, chaos ensued. Samuel slipped out, blending back into the group unnoticed. Autopsy re-exam: yes, belladonna traces in Harlan's system, stab post-mortem. The locked room was staged. Motive deepened: Samuel was the Soviet contact, using his practice to gather intel. Harlan discovered it, planned to expose him. The traitor note referred to Samuel. Frank called the group to the library for the reveal, rain lashing the windows. Dr. Roth poisoned Harlan at dinner. Followed him, staged the stabbing, hid in the armoire, escaped in the confusion. Samuel sneered, pulling a hidden derringer. Clever, detective. Harlan was turning state's evidence on me, on the deals. I had to act. A struggle ensued. Frank disarmed him, Hargrove cuffing the doctor. Unexpected twist: Tommy was an FBI informant, planted to monitor the weekend. He'd urged Harlan to call the bureau, setting the trap. But Samuel struck first. Victor and Eddie had peripheral involvement, debts tied to the espionage ring, but not murder. They faced charges, but lesser ones. As the rain cleared, fog lifting, Frank drove away in his Ford, pipe lit, Springsteen on the cassette player. Another case closed, but the echoes of betrayal lingered like the ocean's roar.